you good, man. But yeah, I'll like randomly bring it up in conversation. I'll be like, yeah, I remember that one time I was raided with Kae and we were doing this and doing that. And they're like, oh, wait, Kae, you raided with that guy? What the heck? This and that. And they'll be like all, butthurt or whatever. And I'll be like, well, nah, man, me and Kae were cool. Like, we raided together for a long time. And he was my raid. Yeah. He was my raid leader. Like, it was all good. You're like, oh, no, he was a jerk to my guild's cousin's best friend's sister, and I heard he was this and that. I'm like, well, did you ever meet him for yourself? Well, no, but I heard enough. It's like that kind of bullshit.
Right.
So I said, you know what?
Set the record straight.
Well, for starters, go ahead and introduce yourself, man. Tell the people who you are.
I am Kae Shade from Zalera. I was a white mage scholar during second coil of Bahamut, and the raid leader / co-GM, I guess, of Kiru.
Yeah. So first question, what was the first MMO you ever played?
First MMO I ever played was called Kristen Tale.
Okay.
It was a Korean MMO.
Oh.
I played it in like 2002, 2003-ish, I think. Like probably like a year and a half before World of Warcraft. So probably like 2003. I went there because a friend that I used to play Brood War with decided to try other games, and he invited me along. Hold on. The game had no level cap. There was almost no quests. It was mostly just grinding, and I'd never played that type of game before, but I got really into it, and about 7 months of playing quite frequently, I got to the 60s, to a place called Dark Sanctuary. In that game, guilds used to compete on the server in something called Survive or Die, where basically they were countless rounds of mobs versus your team, and whoever survived the longest would be the top-ranked guild until the next competition.
So would you say that, actually from the way you're describing this, it sounds like because you pretty much played MMOs at like the birthing of MMOs, would you say that seeing that aspect of like some players that are better than others and stuff like that, would you say that kind of fueled that competitive nature that you kind of had when you were raiding on Zalera?
Yeah, it was a combination of things. So I played Brood War pretty competitively for about like 6 or 7 years before that in RTS. I'd grown up, my older brother was a collector of video games.
Okay.
I used to hang out in his room all the time. He had a TurboGrafx, Sega CD, Sega Dreamcast, Nintendo 64. I mean, he had anything and everything when it came out, but he was more of a collector. He was more of an enthusiast. He wasn't much of a gamer.
Okay.
And when I was like 4 or 5 years old, he used to take me to the arcade, see if I could beat his friends. I remember watching, Resident Evil, the first one as a kid, just sitting there watching him play. And then when I got a little bit older, my friends and I played games like Final Fantasy VII, Final Fantasy Tactics, Saga Frontier, things like that. Was always into that genre, the JRPG, so even like Vagrant Story. So when I stumbled on MMOs, it was kind of it was a no-brainer. It was something that I definitely enjoyed from the get-go.
Whatever game you played, you kind of became a student of that game, and you just wanted to kind of just put forth your best that you could possibly do.
Yeah, so I'm of the mindset that the developers or the producers of these video games are catering to the average audience. Like the most generic for monetization purposes. They're trying to reach out to the average individual. I'd always been inclined in playing I've always been kind of geared towards playing video games at such a young age that I was more than just an average gamer from the start. And if it was balanced from the point of view of my peers, just like I'm not the greatest at catching a ball, they might not be the greatest at playing a game, but since the game's designed for them, I have to find some other means of keeping it competitive for me.
Up next on Tales of Impact.
Now we're gonna get to the meat and the potatoes, because now we've caught up to the Zalera.
Okay.
We'll be right back after these messages. And we're back.
Now we're gonna get to the meat and the potatoes, because now we've caught up to the Zalera.
Okay.
All right, so I'm gonna let you have the floor with this one because it's a long one.
Sure.
But tell me your story from your start on Zalera all the way to the end, and you can throw in all the details you want. It's just tell your truth.
Well, okay, let's see here. So I just cleared turn 5 in Titan Extreme and had transferred to Zalera. That I had cleared first coil,
Right.
which is the first 5 raids. I was trying to find a static on second coil, but after a couple, I think, weeks of trying, there just weren't any. I found out that the majority of the community was actually still on first coil, and primarily because of turn 5.
Yep.
Not only that, most of them had not done Titan Extreme, Ifrit Extreme, Moogle, Leviathan, and so I found myself relentlessly joining party finders in order to meet people and tried to do turn 5. Well, needless to say, they just weren't going that well. And I think after a while, I saw some things that I had noticed that the groups that cleared it were not doing, or things that they were doing that the party finders weren't. I thought I could do the job myself and maybe help get people into second coils so that we could maybe make a static together or something of that nature. It was honestly just, I didn't know anybody, and there was like, I don't know, 2-3 statics on the entire server in second coil.
Pretty much, yeah.
So I started the party finders and met different people. Met you, met Dawn, Aylin, everyone. And eventually we did clear turn 5. But you know, I'd seen how happy everyone was to clear turn 5. And you know, we could have just went on with that and probably just made a static or whatever, but there was 2 things. One, that I'd assumed that the second coil content was going to be much more difficult than turn 5.
Right.
And therefore, had we just barely cleared turn 5, we might just be running into this problem over and over again, that there was more or less a min-max team that could do things better. The other is that should anybody decide to quit once we hit second coil, everyone was still on turn 5, so we would have to go back and clear that individual regardless. And because they'd be at no practice at the time, it would just be a huge time investment. So what I decided to do and asked you guys to help me with is clear people through turn 5.
Yep.
I started the Kae and Friends link shell at some point in this time. You had your bench as well. And I designated... Basically what had happened was, in the beginning, we had sought people who were probably most capable of clearing it and just couldn't find the group and cleared it with them.
Right.
Then it ended up being we would grab people who we thought might be able to clear it. And then we'd grab people who we thought we might be able to teach it. But I noticed that it was weighing on everyone, the constant aiding other people for really no reason other than just to help them. My friends in particular, and I didn't want them to feel taken advantage of or their time to be wasted, things of that nature. So what we started doing was having the 8th person just walk into the wall at the start and 7-manning the content.
Yep.
It wasn't that.
Yep.
It wasn't for any other reason but efficiency, really, because every time you clear that person, just being able to give someone like that Christmas present all the time. It was probably the most rewarding thing I'd ever done in that game. Maybe one of the most rewarding things ever. I started to become a little salty though when people started giving a shit about it. The way in which we did it, that we walled people, that they felt that they should be able to try, and all of these things. And it really aggravated me because it was really like a thankless endeavor sometimes. Some of those people's egos got hurt and were like offended, but it had nothing to do with them as people. It was only a means of just advancing the server, because I feared there was a high probability that the mountain that Zalera was tumbling down was just going to encompass more and more mass of just terribleness. And that, people were going to transfer, leave, and things like that. And it was just going to be a horrible repercussion of what I found to be a lovely community of players.
Right.
A really wholesome community, a community that really had a lot of interesting social circles and social elements too. The next step that happened was at some point it was time to put together a static to pursue second coil. And initially I think what we did was choose some of our better friends from the first endeavors, but as it turned out, at the time it wasn't necessarily the best mechanical players. I'm not going to name names. I'm sure you know what I mean is that the static that we started with was far from the static that we ended with.
Yeah, most definitely.
Not only that, there are key elements to the static that we ended up with that might not have been there. I know that you ran into frustrations with some of the individuals accusing me of favoritism, and looking back, maybe some of that is true. The point being, though, is that there was 2 reasons why I loved that group so much. 1, I thought that they were excellent, but 2, that they were my friends.
Right.
And had those 2 things not consecutively coincided, I might not have kept playing the game at all.
I get it, bitch, act right, act right, act right. When it don't